most interested in the evolution of smartphones, and not just on the consumer side, but really on the supply side. The consumer side obviously opens up a bunch of angles for people to shop mobilely, to be able to access services when and wherever they are. But you're now seeing a broader labor force also have access to smartphones. And so we've seen some of the evolutions with companies like Uber, where that creates a whole different service opportunity. But we're also seeing it with a whole variety of other service providers, and it's not just your white-collar type workers, but it's a variety of other blue-collar type workers. And that opens the door not only to incremental consumer services, but also new business applications that previously were just impossible to do. You look at some of the companies that are providing services, they're burning tons of money, they're losing a dollar or losing many dollars every time they provide the service. So the faster they grow, the more money they lose. And there's the old adage of making it up in volume, but a lot of these guys are not set up to have the math converge anytime soon. And in a lot of these industries, they're more traditional industries, right? So they're not things that trade necessarily at 10 times revenue or at some crazy multiple. There are services out there, like Purple Tie and Molly Maid that have been doing this for years, and they trade at, a small multiple of EBITDA. And so I think those services really need to separate and make it clear why not just being able to buy from the smartphone is interesting, but why the fundamental service is actually better than the historic ones that were available. And when you ultimately have people fulfilling the service in an uncontrolled environment, it can be really hard for those service providers to do that successfully. So I'm both most excited and also most fearful of an area that I think is pretty popular right now. The vast majority of the founders that I've backed are first-time founders. And in some cases, if you look at the most successful founders, their second or third ventures tend to be disasters because they start out day one and they immediately go for that billion-dollar outcome. And I think a lot of times in early stage company, it's less about swinging for the home run out of the gate. It's more about hitting milestones and hitting very near-term milestones to gain acceptance within your audience base. And so what we look for typically with really early stage founders is the ability to set a goal and then touch base with them a couple of months later and for them to be able to execute against that goal. And sometimes we do that from the sidelines, where we just get to know people and we get to understand their philosophy and get to understand their objectives. Sometimes we do that as seed investors, where we put a little bit of money in and then watch them with the hope to lead the Series A. But the real goal is being able to understand, can someone set goals? Can they hire the right people against that? And then when they hit those goals, do they know what they need to do next? Because a lot of times you'll see that companies are just not really understanding, and early stage CEOs are not really understanding both the order of what they need to go after, as well as the right level of ambition early on, versus how to set a moat, how to set a foundation, and then use that foundation to do more interesting things down the road. The thing that I have a philosophy under is I try to be very thoughtful about putting dollars against these milestones or these opportunities. And a lot of times that might manifest itself in taking a risk on a company that other people weren't willing to take a risk on. Because I like to think about it as, look, I'll take a $2 million bet, I'll take a $4 million bet, or $500,000, you kind of all up and down the spectrum, and see whether or not this team can execute against it. A lot of times early stage entrepreneurs are faced with this kind of chicken and egg problem, where the investors want to see X happen and no one's going to invest until X happens. But I think there's a lot of opportunity to say, okay, here's a little bit of money, go prove it out, and if you're able to execute against that, I'll feel a lot more comfortable giving you more money down the road. So I try to be very thoughtful about dollar amount in, what kind of milestones you can accomplish with that, and then how does that lead to follow-on financings, and how does that lead to us ultimately with an interesting ownership perspective and the founder getting the opportunity to go after their dreams. A lot of people will talk about people having a product background or being able to understand the engineering or the technology behind some of these companies. At the end of the day, CEOs, it's a combination of vision and it's a combination of recruiting. It's kind of the ugly beast that CEOs need to partake, which is they need to constantly be 6 months ahead of thinking about where their team needs to go. Because it's probably going to take 3 months to go find someone good, and it's going to take 3 months for them to get ramped up. And if you think about a 10-person company growing very quickly, they're going to be a 25-person company 6-9 months down the road. And so that is a constant struggle for entrepreneurs. And I think the CEOs need to be mindful that they need to understand where they're good, and it's okay to not be good at everything because no one is. But they need to hire around themselves so that they can focus on what they're good at and they can trust other people to go out and execute against it. Well, I've heard a little bit about this Alibaba company. I've heard that might be kind of big, but I don't know. I mean, there's a few. We try to get it right as often as we can, but unfortunately, sometimes you don't see things, and unfortunately, sometimes you call it wrong. So, you know, we missed Uber. I think that's going to be a great company. That's pretty obvious. And then there's a bunch of companies that are more in the middle that we maybe missed early on, but we're now trying to claw our way back into as they grow.